Okay, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, and today we have our second episode featuring a pair of brothers. So welcome to the podcast, Pete and Angelo Natalie. Welcome, guys.
Great being here.
Yeah, I feel privileged to be, second isn't bad, Dan.
Second,
I don't care what they say.
Those Popotnik brothers.
Wow, those are big shoes.
Yeah,
they're legendary. Should we call you Dan or Chip?
You can call me whatever you want. Yeah, I was
Except
telling Pete,
don't call you Collect. I got you.
most people that I went to school with don't know my real name's Dan, but yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
And Angelo, we should say you are calling in from Connecticut, right?
I am.
All
I'm
right.
in my basement here in my condominium,
How
my
long
basement
have you been
studio. I've been here since we moved to Stamford, Connecticut in January of 1984.
Oh, okay. All right. So you've been there for a while.
Yeah.
And am I correct in saying, Pete, you're older than Ange?
Barely.
But there are 8 Natalie siblings. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's 8 siblings, 8 children. I am the oldest. I'm almost 19 years older than the youngest, which means I could have been his father, but
Okay.
I am his godfather.
All right. And where do you fall, Angelo?
I'm second born.
Okay.
All
right.
Yeah. I used to say I'm number 2, but that sounded disgusting. So now I say I'm the second born.
He's the golden child, Dan.
Are there more musicians?
Well, they're not professional musicians, but our brother Alan, who's an attorney,
Yeah.
he has been involved in community theater for years.
Okay.
I don't know if actually, I think he did something not too long before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Then our brother Joel, who is on radio.
Yep. I was on his show before.
He does. He has been on like in the praise band at his church.
Okay.
Anybody else, Pete?
Well, Jeffrey's an aspiring drummer.
That's right.
There's 3 of us.
I actually used to
3
give
of
Jeff.
the boys are drummers in pecking order. Angelo's number 1, since that was his main instrument initially. I'm a strong second, right, Ange?
I was just going to say, are you guys neck and neck, you and Jeff? I used to give Jeff left, by the way. Our little brother Jeff, who's like in his 50s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Whenever I think of you guys, I always think back to the Calabrese Club and when you were in Ruby Port, you know. But in doing my research, I discovered that you guys, your roots there go even farther back. I mean, obviously being Italian, but I found an article from 1963 when you guys were part of a kids group that performed there. Maybe you were a dance group or something.
Yeah, we were part of the neighborhood dance group for the was it the Sesquicentennial?
Sesquicentennial, yeah.
Yeah, this said the Italian American Day Festival. And we were playing at the stadium and at the Calabrese Club.
At the Calabrese Club?
Yeah.
Wow. That I don't remember.
No.
Dan, what year was that?
63.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
13th, 63. That's exactly where you were that day.
Wow, I was 11
That was
years
the
old.
summer before I started high school. And the dance that we learned was the Tarantella.
Oh, so it was dancing.
It
was then, yeah.
And so, Pete, you're 3 years, 2 years. How much older than Andrew?
What, Ange? About 2.5 years older.
Yeah, but yes, 2 years and 3 months.
That was a
4
very
months.
memorable experience for us.
Oh yeah.
One of us had a pretty heavy crush on a very beautiful
I'm not ashamed
young
to
Italian.
listen, Dan. I'm not ashamed to say that I fell in love
Love it.
with Laura Ciotti, who is Cy Ciotti's sister.
The owner of the club.
Yes.
I mean, here, think of that's kind of that's
Hey,
kind
Laura,
of
how's it going?
that's kind of profound. Anyway,
Angelo had a crush on you.
Well, I hope she knew that, but I'm sure she's happy with her life, and I'm certainly happy with mine.
You guys both have been married 40 some years, right? Or
I've been married 49 years.
yeah.
This year it'll be 50 in August.
So nothing to worry about.
Right. Yeah. I think we're pretty much going to stick with it.
You locked in, Ange?
We're locked in. Final
I'm
answer.
46.
Well, so we're obviously going to get into some of the music stuff and everything. And, talk more about Miss Ciotti and your love of her. And Andrew, we'll even talk about you being a bus patrol at St. Joseph's, all that hard hitting journalism stuff. But let's start with the old guy. Let's start with Pete. So you both did go to St. Joe's. You both went to prep. You each dabbled a little bit in Edinburgh too. But Pete, what I want to understand is, so you wrestled at Edinburgh too, right?
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, you were a bit of an athlete, and I always bring that up. I don't know if that's an insult or not.
No, I was an aspiring athlete.
Okay. All right.
Actually, I went out for the football team in 8th grade, late. I mean, somebody had dropped out for whatever reason.
At St. Joe's.
I basically picked up his spot. I was really small, Dan. And then when I went to Edinburgh, one of my buddies, one of the guys that I met as a freshman, he was a real wrestler. He wrestled for Fort LaBeouf. And I don't know why, but he encouraged me to try out for a college wrestling team. I had never wrestled in my life. And I hung on until they took the picture for the yearbook, and then I quit.
Perfect. All right. Well,
So I am in the yearbook.
I always ask that question because, some guys, I've mentioned this in the past, where like Jack Stevenson, for example, he was a really good athlete at prep also, but he wasn't a musician at the time. So when were you just trombone or?
No, I love my story in a way. And I think it reflects a lot of how people develop, into musicians. But way back then, when I was in 4th grade, either 10 or 11 years old, Markham's had this program where they would go into the schools and start little bands. Okay, now I have a granddaughter who's in 4th grade. She just started playing violin, but they've got a program in the Mill Creek schools. We didn't. So they came in, formed a little band. I don't even know how I selected trumpet, but that's what I selected. One of their teachers would come once a week and conduct the band. And basically what they were doing is selling instruments and lessons, because I ended up taking lessons at Markham's. Probably that story is similar with a lot of people in Erie.
And those lessons you were taking what?
For trumpet.
Oh, for trumpet.
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And I must have taken them several years. That's kind of fuzzy to me.
I think you took right until you went to prep, right?
Right till I went to prep. I'm not
so.
sure. But the one thing I remember most is dedicated musician, right? I never practiced. And at one point, my teacher said, basically, why are you doing this? I think it was apparent, Dan, that I didn't practice.
All right.
So anyway, so then I go to prep, and I'm in the band, and I'm in the last row as a trumpeter. So basically, I was really pretty bad.
Right.
And I think it was the next year that Tony Savelli, I don't know if that name is familiar to you, but he was a true maestro.
Okay.
And he approached me, and he needed a baritone player. He needed two baritones. He only had one. So he encouraged me to try it. And I really liked it because it was easier to play. And the trumpet just was, just really wasn't my instrument. So anyway, Tony convinced me. Angelo reminded me, he came to our home to convince my dad to allow me to do this. Because my dad was
upset.
Not a fan of this at all. So anyway, I became a baritone player for the last, I believe, 3 years of my experience at prep. And then I didn't play again until the summer of 1971, when Ruby Port happened.
Right.
Which, like a lot of guys our age, everybody wanted, or many of us wanted to be in a band. The Beatles came on the scene when I was 14. I mean, I was a perfect age to really, revel in what was happening. But I was a bad horn player, and I don't know that there were many horn bands back then. I can't remember, Ange.
Yeah.
I don't know if
No,
you can.
no.
So there
not too many.
wasn't an outlet for me, and really I was so envious of Angelo and Dick Bucko and Bob Seaman, because they had bands from when they were pre-teenagers.
Sure. Right.
At least Ange and Dickie. And so I wanted to be a part of it, and I never had the opportunity until I was 21 years old. And really, through an amazing story, Angelo was the one who invited me to be in the band.
Was the band already in existence? Angela, did you
No,
start
we were
Ruby
pulling,
Port, or did Paul
we-
Youghlin?
We had already met Paul Youghlin. We meaning like me and Bob Tome.
Yep.
And Bobby Seaman. And Paul showed up at one of our rehearsals when we had our band. I can't remember. It was some form of group therapy that didn't use that name anymore. But he came to one of our rehearsals and he talked with us, and nothing really came of it until like maybe a year later or whatever. And I spoke with Paul Youghlin again, and he started talking about being in the house band at the Calabrese Club. And I said, well, my brother plays baritone horn. Dan, you know what a baritone is
really
a baby
great.
tuba. Baritone horn is a baby tuba. Oh. But Pete ended up trading up to a valve trombone. Yeah. Before he got the valve trombone, I didn't even know that there was such a thing. Because, you figure like a trombone is like just with the slide.
Yeah, right.
And I was thinking on the way here, I don't even know how I learned that there was such a thing. And, could you imagine me playing a baritone in
in a Dixieland band,
I mean,
maybe,
now
but not
in a jazz
rock
band, it would be cool.
I've never even seen a no.
Well, tubas.
Were your parents, I mean, Angelo, obviously you played drums and keys and everything, but were your parents on board with the music idea? Because
yes,
at this point, yeah, they were. Because you said, you've been out of high school now for 3 years before Ruby Port, forms, or 4 years or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they were cool with the whole thing.
So they were cool with it. My dad really encouraged us to, towards excellence. He was the first one to graduate from high school in his family. And then he became, a city cop, and he would have to go to court, often because of his work. And he would see these attorneys and he would say, these guys put their pants on one leg at a time, the same as I do. And he was like, it was kind of an epiphany a bit for him that, I could have done that. So he encouraged us really to think about being attorneys. And I was open to the idea. And I even was going to join the debate club at prep when I was in like the first week of ninth grade at prep. And I showed up at the first meeting of the debate club and I go, wait a minute. I don't want to be an attorney. I want to be a musician.
Yeah.
So I went home and I told my father, I said, I told him what happened, this experience. And he goes, and without missing a beat, he goes, well, then you be the very best musician that you can be.
Awesome.
Just like that, he turned on a dime. And so he was always very affirming and encouraging. Of course, he wanted me to get a degree in music, which, Lord willing, I will finish in May of this year.
Do you
a little
know
bit
that
late.
Story, Dan?
Took a little while to get to that.
Took a little bit long. Yeah, I was a freshman at Edinburgh in the fall of '70, but so yeah, I was a music ed major there. But anyway, he was very much okay then. So he knew some professional musicians in Erie, like Flip Bellotti, who was a drum teacher at Markham's. And he was so busy.
He was Italian, right, Ange?
Yeah, that helped. He was so busy, I couldn't even get in to see him. I couldn't even get lessons with him. I took them for one of his students, the late, great Johnny Berarducci.
Okay.
Yeah. So
if we go back to Ruby Port, so Pete is picking up this new instrument that he didn't even know existed. Had Ruby Port been playing before you joined the band, Pete?
Well, listen to this is great. Okay, so number one, this is such a testament to Paul Yocklin. None of us, at least I didn't. I never played in front of him. There was no audition. All he knew is that Angelo was vouching for me and Art Oligieri because, you know, Paul had it in his mind that he wanted a horn band. He wanted a show band, you know, similar to, you know, what he had been doing in Vegas and wherever else they played. So anyway, I had no horn, Dan. I had my own
started on the
trumpet that I
baritone.
wasn't
You brought the baritone.
I went down to prep and I bought the horn that I used to march with.
You didn't have
from
it?
Tony Savelli.
Are you
it
serious?
Was a marching baritone. It wasn't even like a proper concert band.
Oh my
baritone.
gosh.
So anyway, when Ruby Port started our rehearsals, that's what I played.
Okay.
I was rehearsing with this baritone horn, and we actually started to do some practice gigs at the Bell Valley swimming pool.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes.
I think we made $5 each, but this is the genius of Paul in a way. Here we are. I mean, it's kind of humbling, number one. We're playing, you know, by a pool with all these kids, but it gave us an opportunity to play as a band, and I'm playing this baritone horn. I finally ordered one from this well-known music store in Cleveland, whose name I can't remember. I don't know if you can, Ange.
I've been there. I can't remember it either.
So anyway, I go up the day of our very first gig at the Calabrese Club, which was July 4th, 1971. On that day, I drove to Cleveland, came back, and played that horn in the band for the very first time.
And how'd it go?
I think one of the valves was sticking for some reason. So it didn't go great. It was kind of an inauspicious beginning, but I still have that horn, and that's the horn I play to this day.
Okay.
Full of bumps and But
so you were there from the beginning then?
Oh yeah. Yeah, all of us.
Yeah,
the original members, Paul Yocklin, Angelo, Dick Buckle, Bob Seaman, Paula
Grack Holmes,
Nicky Nardo, me, and Art Oligieri. It was an 8-piece band.
So Jeannie wasn't there?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Jeannie joined the band because when Paula went back, you know, this was the summer of 71. We had a fantastic summer. When Paula went back to school, her dad wouldn't allow her to sing on Wednesdays and Sundays.
She did tell me that. Right. Yeah.
Funny.
So she was singing on the weekends, and Jeannie was singing with us, you know, the other days. And, you know,
she sang full time with us
4 nights a week, as you know, the rest of us were playing 4 nights a week.
Gotcha. Well, Pete, you had mentioned that Ange had played already with Dickie and Nick or whoever. Bob. Yeah. What was that? Was that group therapy, Angelo? Or
well, okay. So Dickie and I, our history goes back to St. Joe's. Okay, anybody who lived north of 25th Street would walk home together after school from first grade. Well, maybe not first grade, but we all became like this Sastre Street gang, and we played ball together. We had snowball fights together, and then when the Beatles showed up, we started playing the Beatles. We started pretending we were the Beatles, and Dickie would, and our other friends, Dave Delio and Dave Roof, Joe Green, they would pretend that they were playing guitars with pieces of wood.
Okay.
And I played like a diaper
Chip about
pail.
your drum set, Ange.
Well, first of all, with those guys, I played a diaper pail with some broken, borrowed drumsticks from my friend Luther Gibbs, who lived on 19th Street, 19th and Chestnut. But so we would like sing, the Beatles stuff. We knew all that stuff by heart. We, Herman's Hermits and
Dave Clark
Freddie
5.
and the Dreamers and all these guys, like all the British acts that were coming out in the early 60s. And then we had I hope Dickie Buckle remembers this, man. Okay, we had what we call a penny fair, where we raised enough money at this penny fair to buy one guy a guitar.
Oh, wow.
So we decided it should be Dickie. because he had two uncles that played guitar, and he was going to be able to take lessons from one of them.
Gotcha.
It was like one of the most generous things that a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
you know, like everybody was like, yeah, we'll buy a guitar for Dickie. So he got this inexpensive, what they called a box guitar. It was an acoustic steel string, you know, guitar. And he was a quick learner. He learned, you know, these chords quickly, and he was taking lessons from his uncle. And so then we had like a real guitar. And we were called, back then we were called the Galaxies with Dickie
nice.
Buckle and these guys. And we sang at the St. Joe's school picnic every year, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Oh,
By the
wow.
time, 8th grade is
An
when I got
annual
my
gig.
I got my drum set as an 8th grade graduation present. But of course, I harassed my parents, like, you know, since I was 4 years old to get a set of drums.
Oh, wait, you were playing in this event in
Yeah.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and you only got your drums in 8th grade? Don't tell me
Yeah.
you were playing that diaper pail in 6th
I
and
was,
7th grade.
oh yeah. I was playing, I turned out
Diaper pail,
diaper pail upside down.
popcorn, buckets, right edge.
Can you
Right.
imagine today saying to a kid, you want to be in a band? That diaper pail. What the
Yeah.
hell?
Well, Pete and I built a set of drums at home out of these big cans that my mom would get the soap in. Okay,
Laundry detergent.
Oh, yeah.
laundry detergent. So we flattened out the lids for cymbals, and we turned the cans upside down for drums, and we used a bathtub for a kick drum, and we strapped some kind of a thing on our foot so we could kick the kick drum. It was pretty
Wow.
ambitious project.
Yeah.
It was mostly Pete's
We were
idea.
poor.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are building your own stuff. Meanwhile, you're funding Dickie's instruments.
Yeah, well, listen, man. And Dickie was, he's a real natural.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, like, he would, like, teach us what he was learning. So we were all like just a couple weeks behind him in terms of playing the guitar.
Oh.
And he taught us how to play the killer chord, which is the B7. And we called it the killer chord. You know, if you can play that, you know, then you're really something. But then when I got my drums, then it was like, okay, now Dickie got electric guitar, he got an amplifier. Dave Delio got a Farfisa organ and an amplifier. And we were, you know, really kind of like getting those drums.
Trio at first, Ange?
Well, I think we had somebody else. Maybe Dave Roof played guitar too.
You needed to have four so you could be a, Beatles
A
tribute
Beatles,
band.
yeah.
But that little band with Dickie and Dave Delio, we added Ron Soxy. I don't know if you know that name.
I don't.
But Ron went to, I don't know how we even found him, but he went to McDowell, and his dad would drive him to my house on 18th Street for practice. And then another guy, Mike Dragoon, rest in peace, Mike. He's no longer with us, but he played bass, and he was like a good little bass player, you know. So we like had a real rock and roll band in 9th grade at prep, you know,
And
drums,
that's the
guitars.
Galaxies.
And that turned into the other half.
Okay. All right. And
And
were
we
you
became the
doing,
other
like,
half.
aside from prep, were you doing YCO and stuff like that, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our first gig was at Junior YCO at the Glenwood Y, which was for middle school kids, or at the time we called them junior high. And we got $5, not $5 a piece, $5 period for 5 guys. And I remember my dad talking to Dickie's dad, Mr. Buckle, and he goes, $5. He goes, that's not even enough to pay for the gas. And I remember thinking, he doesn't want me to chip in for gas, does he? You know, so. But that
You
was a
have to ask
great
Dickie
gig,
back
man.
for more of those pennies.
Yeah, right from the penny fair.
But that was a great experience, the Junior YCO thing, because when we weren't playing, we would go there and see all these other bands. And there was some like nice little young bands playing up there, you know?
Sure.
Remember Mark Dodge's band? I don't know if you know Mark.
No.
Mike, I'm pretty sure Mark is still in Erie. I'm not sure, but he's a very talented guy. But his band had like these really sophisticated like Kinks outfits, you know, with the
Oh, yeah.
shirts, you know,
Shark
the
skin.
blousy
Yeah.
shirts, you know. Anyway,
Yeah.
That was a
Yeah,
fun time.
I've talked to a lot of folks that played, both junior and regular YCO dances and stuff, and that was, where you cut your teeth on everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so when you're at prep, I know you were a basketball player at St. Joe's. Were you playing basketball there too?
I'm so glad you asked that question.
I mean, you played on the championship team for St. Joe's. I don't want to undersell this at
Dan,
all.
check that out.
Okay.
So
I don't remember
was like
that, Ange.
I was the sixth man at St. Joe's.
The proverbial sixth man.
And Coach Bill Flaherty
Uh-huh.
was our coach at St. Joe's. And then when we were in when we were eighth grade, he went to prep to be a coach down there. So he left St.
Very
Joe's.
successful.
So
coach.
when I went to prep, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a shoe-in, man. I'm going to get on the team because my buddy Bill Flaherty's the coach. And so I showed up at basketball tryouts, and I Bill saw me from across the gym, and his whole face dropped. And he walked up to me. He said, "Ange, don't try out. You're not going to make it. Every kid who started at every Catholic school in Erie, there's like probably 10 teams.
Yeah.
They're all competing for how many spots?
Men welcome.
I mean, so I was so dejected, but you know what? That was the best thing that ever happened to me because, I really turned my focus on music.
Yeah.
And so it's like that experience with the debate club, which I still could have joined the debate team, the debate team. And then, Bill Flaherty telling me not to try out. Those two things were so clarifying for me to really put more laser focus on playing the drums.
And Pete, I mean, your brother's playing drums. You never had an inkling I want to pick up guitar or play drums or something like that? Or
I don't think I was smart enough to have that inkling. I wanted to be in a band so bad. I was always on the fringe. I would accompany Ange to gigs and, kind of saw myself in a managerial light, but I'd never really managed any of your bands.
you didn't
Except
sing.
Clockwise.
No, back
Well, there
then
wasn't
I
really
wasn't
management.
a professional singer, Dan.
Yeah.
That's only been a recent development in the last.
Pete, make sure you leave
years.
your business card with a jam because he may need somebody to sing for him on one of his gigs, Pete.
Oh my gosh! I never even had the lead in a Ruby Port song in the first iteration of Ruby Port.
Well, we had so many singers. I mean, it's the people that just sang.
I
Paul,
was the
Jeannie,
sixth man
Paula.
of singers.
And then Paul wanted me to come up. He wanted me to step out from the drums and come up front with Ruby Port. And I was actually open to it. With my vanity, I was actually open to it. And Johnny Berducci actually sat in on drums.
Oh, wow.
My mentor, my hero. And he did a really good job. He's a jazz drummer. And here we are playing all this pop stuff and R&B stuff.
Well, Ange, while I was there, John Berducci, you went up.
No, it
Johnny?
wasn't. No, it wasn't.
I don't
it was
remember
after
that at
you were
all.
gone by then.
Dino Dinelli, yeah, but Johnny.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No, he came, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Dino.
That was our Beatles go see the Epics at the Peppermint Lounge
I was going to say,
moment.
Paula told that story, but I'd like to hear it from you guys. I mean, set the stage for us.
Well,
he's got the stick. Nice. Still got it.
It all centered around Paul, because Paul knew everybody. And when the Rascals were forming, number one, they weren't the Rascals initially, right, Ange? I forget what their name was. The Frogs or something? I don't know.
But they were the Young Rascals before they were the Rascals.
I mean, before they were anything.
I don't know.
Okay. Before they were anything, all these bands would go to the Peppermint, and here's the Epics, the house band, and they all went to see the Epics. So I have a cute story about that too, but I don't know if we have time.
All right.
Anyway, so they come to Erie, however many years later, 6 years later, and they're playing a gig at Gannon.
No, it was at Edinburgh.
Was it Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yeah. And we
All
couldn't
right,
go because we were playing.
So,
we were playing
they
at the
come
Cali
to
Club.
Erie. Paul and Angelo, actually, you went and picked them up at the airport,
Went
right?
to the airport, and we were standing there by the gate Felix Cavalieri and Dino Danelli get off the plane, and they walk in, they go, Paul, how you doing? And like they were like hugging and everything. I go, holy smokes, man.
And like, you're a huge Dino fan at this point, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I was like so starstruck.
Yeah.
And I had a pack of gum, and I go to Dino. I said, you want a stick of gum? He goes, yeah, man, thanks. And I was like, I just gave a stick of gum to Dino Danelli, my hero,
So they come to the Cali Club after the gig at Edinburgh. Is that how it worked? All right. And
Yeah.
and they try to whisk Paula away, right? I mean, or Felix.
Yeah.
They did kind of, didn't they?
Yeah.
Well, not kind of. I mean, Felix had already produced Laura Nero,
Right.
and Laura Nero was one of Paula's idols.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she really.
So the
idolized her.
idea of Felix producing Paula was 18 then, but she was so impressive. I mean, probably, raw in the sense of comparing her to Laura Nero, but powerful and,
Oh, yeah.
so stylish. He obviously he saw the level of talent that she possessed, and he gave her, I always thought it was a business card, but I guess it was his number.
Yeah.
And said, make sure you contact me.
Yeah.
Right. 18-year-old girl, with, one of the recognized producers of the time, a star. And she actually, I don't know if she told you, she lost that phone number.
Oh, okay.
Can you believe it?
But they did not get up and play or anything, right?
They
were
did.
just-
They
oh, did
did.
they?
With it, but they didn't play with us. Okay, so it was Dino and Felix and a guitar player and a bass player, and they came up, and Dino played my drums, and Felix played Nicky Nardo's organ, and
Hammond B3.
so they played our instruments. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think they brought even their guitars with them, or did they? I can't remember, but
I
they got up
don't
and they
know.
did a jam, like an extended jam, which we have a recording of it.
Oh, wow.
And it was so good. And I
Nice.
go, and Dino's playing my drums. Like, these are the same drums I just got done playing like a few minutes before that. And they're like, what
They
in the
sound
world?
different.
Yeah.
They sounded amazing. And I'm serious. My drumming changed instantly. I instantly started playing with more force and muscle, and was really digging in. And it was just that encounter with Dino and his playing that. I mean, it changed. I went from being kind of, not assertive on the drums, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what's his name? Stevie. When you interviewed Steve McConnell, he paid Ange a big compliment.
Right.
So Ange, he had a following, I guess, back in the day.
Well, there's Mom, Steve McConnell.
Well, I'll tell you what, in preparation for this episode, obviously, like the other ones, I do my homework. I know things about, you guys, obviously, just like I've said so far. And one of the things I uncovered was, Ange, in '69, you're at a prep variety show called Comedy Tonight. And then all the music groups it's centered around the Honeymooners theme. And,
Really? Oh my gosh.
And then the following year at the variety show, I was talking to Jack Belzik, who you probably know, and
Sure.
and I know, and I reached out to Jack and Denny Neiman's, and I said, "Hey, did you guys go to school with Angelo?" And Jack got back to me. He's like, "Oh man," he says, "I remember at that 1970 prep variety show when Ange played Let It Be.
Yeah.
It was like a wow moment." That's what he said to me.
Oh my gosh,
I-
Dan.
I was there too, Dan. I went
Were
with,
you?
well,
You-
I went the night my mom, our Aunt Minnie, and I was accompanied by, I don't know if you know this name, Sue Gall, Paul
No.
Gall's
Paul
sister.
Gall's. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
She's
She's a
an
musician.
amazing musician.
Oh.
Songwriter.
Yeah. And that was an amazing time.
So it was like a
That
couple
moment.
it was like Friday and Saturday night, right?
Yeah, I
So,
think it was more than one
yeah.
night.
So speaking of Mark Dodge, but the at prep they wouldn't let us like bring in friends from other schools. So if you were there was nobody in my band who went to prep. So we formed kind of like a pickup band of prepsters.
Oh.
And Mark Dodge was one of them. And I said, I want to sing Let It Be, and I'll play the piano. Now, listen, I had never played piano in front of anybody.
Okay.
But like Let It Be is really a pretty easy song to play on the piano.
Okay. All right.
And
And it
not
was
a
just
not-
you played and sang.
no, it was the whole band. We had
whole
Okay.
we had maybe Mark might have even played. Mark Dodge might have even played drums.
And I know John Settlemeyer was there, and Denny Neiman's too. I mean, two good musicians who are still playing in Erie today.
Those are the
Yeah.
guys that were in that band.
I'm
No,
not sure if they were in that band. They were at that event
Okay.
playing, but not maybe with Angelo.
oh, they played at the. Okay, yeah, there was more than one band.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, but Dan, not to belabor this thing, but to this day, okay, I graduated in 1970, so in 2021 we had our delayed 50-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Our prep reunion, and I'm still to this day the guys are like, and I still remember, man, when you sang "Let It Be" at the variety
The highlight
variety
of your
show.
career, Ange.
And also, I would do at a couple of pep rallies. This is really jazzed. They let me do drum solos.
Oh,
I would
wow.
just come out there with just my drum set, just that. 1,000 crazy boys, all
Yeah.
packed in that auditorium, 1,000. And I'm playing a drum solo, and they're going nuts. I could have been the worst drummer ever, and they still would have Anyway,
You would?
Cool. Ange.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how you remember those things. Like I'm a McDowell guy. I graduated in '83, and Jack Campbell, great local, guitar
Yep.
player and singer and everything. Jack was a year before me, and I remember his year. Him and a lot of people do my age. They're like, "How about Jack Campbell doing Freebird at that variety show
Oh,
in 1981?"
wow.
We're like, "Holy shit, that was
he
incredible!"
nailed it,
did that.
right?
Yeah, and like, I see Jack to this day. I'm like, dude, I remember back then. It was probably like the same thing. Like that's what you remember. I've been playing music for 40 years.
Oh, that's funny, man.
So
it's-
Ruby Port it doesn't last as long as I thought it did. The initial incarnation, like till about 73, right? It's
Yeah.
like 2 years.
Well,
I think it was 3 years.
Pete was in
actually-
actually a short time. Pete, you and Paula left.
I was gone in 6 months.
so
But
I was.
they were probably the most eventful 6 months, maybe of my entire life.
Right.
Were
I
you
was so
already-
mad at this guy, Dan.
Yeah,
I was mad at him and Paula because they left, and because 6 months into it, things were really starting to gel musically, and we went from having 20 people there to
First night
packing
it
the
was
place out. It was-
girlfriends and right?
Yeah,
There were-
when
I
we
mean,
first
really,
started,
there
but
was-
once the word got out, that place was packed. So things were really starting to happen. So they left. But Dickie and I were there from the beginning for 14 months.
Okay.
And we played there at least 4 nights a week, except for when the first summer when we went to Boston was that for 2 weeks, Pete?
2 weeks, yeah.
So, and then Dickie and I hooked up with the Guzik brothers to form the Cows.
Gotcha. Right.
And
Ange doesn't get enough recognition as the first drummer of the Cows.
well,
That-
Pete, come on.
That's right.
kind of-
I wasn't
that's a
with the
burr
Cows
under
for
my saddle.
I wasn't
think
with the
Ange
Cows
is
for very
humble
long.
about it, but
Everybody's seen the underwear picture, Pete. He gets
Oh,
plenty
my
of
gosh.
recognition.
Hey, Dan, I will say this. We argue about who came up with the name Cows, which I think I did, but maybe Ronnie thinks he did. But
Dickie did
they-
not. I know.
they better admit that the underwear idea and the Burger King crowns, that
Yeah.
was my idea.
That was
bro.
all you? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so, Pete, do you leave Ruby Port? Are you working at Niagara Constructors at the time already? Or
actually, I was working at City Hall as a custodian.
okay, all right.
And
Still going to school, right?
what's that?
Still in school?
No. Well, yeah, I graduated around the time that I left the band, and
Okay.
I stayed at City Hall for about a year after that, and then I went into construction.
All right. So like we talked about with with you, like, Ruby Port, you eventually, it morphs into Poe for a little bit, right? And then, or for a minute.
Yeah, I don't.
Well,
That story's kind of fuzzy. No,
okay,
no,
so
no.
Poe is
Paul
like,
was in Poe.
okay, was that
that was
Bobby
Bob
Seaman?
Seaman's band?
All right.
Yeah,
That was,
and
that was,
they played the club.
Yeah.
I saw them play the club.
But then
Okay,
the cows
so
happen.
the cows. Okay, the cows happened in late summer 70. Okay, in the summer of 72.
Right.
Like, okay, and I love those guys, the Guzik brothers. Of course, Dickie was like a brother to me, and so we're starting to get gigs. We're playing at the Cow Shed, which is kind of where we got the name of the cows.
Right.
And then I get a call from Bob Tome, who I had been in group therapy
Yeah.
in high school. Bob was offered to be in Rubyport, by the way, and he passed on it.
Oh, okay.
So
he might
did
have even
Janice Wassel, right?
I think he might have even come to the first rehearsal and then never came back. I don't know why, but anyway, so Bob Tome called me from Akron, Ohio, and he was in a musical partnership with Jeff Brown, and he asked me to join their backup band. And he said, we have management, and we're headed for a label, and we're going to do a record. And so I had stars in my eyes. And so after a short time with the Cows, I left for Akron. And, I know that was kind of a shocking thing to Dick and Ron and Dennis, especially because we really had something good going and we were really having a good time. And
at this point, Ma Brown is not even
Ma Brown was what came out of Bob Tome's partnership with Jeff Brown.
Gotcha.
And so I think I'm trying to think who. I don't think it was Joey didn't replace me in the Cows.
Was it Bob or Mike? Let's see who else was in the Cows. Bob Lipinski, Mike Zabojbovsky.
I don't remember.
Wasn't Stevie, was it? Steve McConnell?
Steve replaced me in Ruby Port.
Yeah, I know.
But I can't remember. Dennis was a drummer too, by the way. We were a four-man band, and we did double drummers sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Those other guys were in Applesauce. I'm sorry. I was mixing the bands up because I know Applesauce kind of morphed into the Cows.
So the Poe thing came later.
Different configurations.
Yes, they did.
So you were asking about Poe.
Yeah.
And I know that Mike Goodwin and Bobby Seaman were in Poe, right?
Yeah.
So my wife and I got married in August of 73, and shortly thereafter we moved into the apartment downstairs from Bob and Debbie Seaman.
Okay.
And their dogs, their two dogs, because they're upstairs on the floor like
big dogs.
Well, one was big, one was little. Anyway, so I had left the bar band scene because of my having a dramatic spiritual conversion in Akron when I was with Ma Brown.
Right.
But I'm still obviously close with the Siemens because they're the ones that turned us on to the apartment. And so their drummer went away for something.
Okay.
So I sat in with them for a while and actually played New Year's Eve at the Cali Club with Poe. On New Year's Eve, 1973, that first year we were married. And also on that bill the same night was the Popotnik brothers. They called, I don't know if they were called Raven then.
They were Raven. No. They were Philip when I got married in 1976.
These guys, we really looked up to Philip. They were
did.
I mean,
they were
Phil's
the band in my estimation.
Yeah. Phil was a little older than us.
Right.
And Pete, is it Pete Peterson? Right? I was going to say Mitchell. That's the drummer from Hendrix. But Pete was such a cool guy.
He was.
And you know, he was their drummer, and we just had a great time on New Year's Eve, 1973, with Poe and with Philip, back in the old stomping grounds, you
That's
know.
great.
And I actually played with Poe for, I don't know, several weeks at least, you know.
Well,
Feels like.
the one thing around that time on February 9th, you play with Phil Kagi at the Villa College.
What year was that?
74. So February 9th, 74. You're on the same bill as Phil Kagi at Villa. I mean,
Yeah.
any memories of that or?
Well, I tell you, I do remember Jonah opening up for Phil, but now that you say it, this would be before Jonah.
Yeah. It was like
so I must
3
have been
months
playing
before.
either solo or with Paula, because Paula and I had a duet act called Paula and Angelo.
Oh, okay. It's creative.
And we played at coffee houses. It was just like me on Pete's piano. Pete still has it, a nice old classic Wurlitzer electric piano that he let me borrow for years.
He wants it, Dan, and he's not getting it.
So,
but now no more drums at this point. Now you're a piano player or a keyboard player.
Yeah, but I'm playing the piano like I play drums. Boom, that
Let It Be it really hooked you.
Yeah. So we're like doing a lot of original stuff, and we're doing some covers, some like gospel rock covers. And Paula was, you know, this is not, you're not supposed to do this, but Paula would take Laura Nero songs and change the lyrics. I mean, this one song, Desiree by Laura Nero, she changed it to "Oh Jesus Lord," and was just really a beautiful ballad, you know. But so we had a good time doing that. And Paula, that duet was kind of like the precursor to Jonah.
Yeah.
Which involved Tom
Started a
Stone, who
whole
was
new
in
era.
not Tom Stone. Yeah, Tom Stone.
Yeah,
who
Tom
was
Stone was on drums, right?
Gosh, he was
Mike
on drums.
Watson's on bass.
He played he was in Anacrusis. I knew him from
That I managed for a short time.
I knew
did finally get a
Anacrusis
manager
from the
gig.
high school band days, you know. Anacrusis played at a prom to dawn that I went to as like a senior. I think it was my senior year. And so I just kind of knew Tom from that scene. This was before social media, so you have to meet people
Physically
in real time, you know. But
yeah, it's weird because like I said, I had that listing of you playing maybe with Paula for Phil Kagi at Villa College. And then that was February of 74. And then 3 months later, I have Jonah opening for Randy Stonehill at Villa.
oh, okay.
I mean, you must have been together or practicing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And Randy Stonehill's a big Christian act at that point, right?
One of the biggest.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so
that
those
actually
were big gigs for you guys.
it was like, so what was kind of cool about that is that our little Jesus People Church in Erie sponsored, we would, you know, basically promote concerts. We'd bring in Phil Kagi, Randy Stonehill, and these different acts. And then our local people like Paula and Angelo and Jonah and Howie Bolton, they would open up for these, the acts that we brought in. So it was kind of cool. So Jonas did, we played in, at Villa and also in Akron, like the next night, I believe, for Craig Yo, Pete, if you remember. So we played 2 nights in a row with
Man, we're not getting past the early 70s.
I know. Yeah. This is going to be a
Sorry.
3-parter. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's all right. I mean, this is interesting stuff to me, you know, because like Pete, at this point, you're not playing music, right?
I'm not playing music, but I was intricately involved in the concerts and promoting the musicians.
Is this Parable Productions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Because like you said, Angelo, like going to Akron, you have a bit of a spiritual awakening. And from then on, you guys do a lot of that Christian type of music, right? You're both involved. I mean, Pete, obviously you become a reverend and pastor and all that stuff, right? I mean,
that took a couple of years because the early part of that, he was really involved in developing Parable Productions. which we had this really small group, this small congregation of people. Everybody's pretty much in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And there were several really talented singers and songwriters and, musicians. And, they started forming bands. And, Tom Beam,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know if you've talked to him on the show yet.
No, not yet.
He's okay. You got to talk to Tom because he's got quite a history, in the rock and roll scene in Erie.
Yeah.
He was a crazy man rocker.
Yes, he was.
Oh my gosh,
He was one of my favorites.
he was.
What was,
well, he's
what
still
was
great.
Ange, what was the place on Peach Street? 1914 Tie?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Did he play
remember seeing Tom there,
Really?
man. He
Okay.
was so impressive.
Tom Beam. That's the man. He's the man to know. But yeah. So we did a lot of. Pete did all that stuff. Pete didn't get into the pastoral thing for at least a few years.
Well,
Couple
when you
years.
mentioned that 1914 tie, I always like to think about the different places that are now gone and where did you
Yeah.
play back then. And one of the things that I found out, and I don't even know if bands do this today. I don't think they do, is there was something in there that talked about Jonah just putting on a concert at Perry Square.
Mhm.
Oh
and
yeah.
just free concerts. I
Yep.
mean, and I read that a few times, maybe Clockwise, you eventually become Clockwise and you did the same thing. I mean,
Yep.
was that, I know Pete, you were involved with Parable Productions. Was
Yeah.
that something you guys coordinated, or was it just hey, we're
Yeah.
gonna play, like you said, Angelo, there's no social media, so you got to coordinate, get
Right.
people there.
Yeah. No,
It
it
was-
was organized and
It
promoted.
was so much
and-
about trying to. Okay, Jonah and Clockwise are the same thing. It's just,
Right.
We just changed our name. So when we formed that band, it was so kind of like a band with a cause kind of thing that we really weren't about making money, and we really didn't make much either.
Okay.
So we really accomplished that goal. So we would go down to City Hall and book the band shell, that mobile band shell. I
Yeah.
don't know if they still have it.
Yeah.
But they would
still
park
exists.
it. They
Yeah.
would park it in Perry Square, and we had our own like slamming PA system, that the church bought. And that was really probably because of Tom Stone. Tom was very technical, and he was very knowledgeable about sound reinforcement. And he had good friends who were knowledgeable too, like Keith Vasheko, who really factored in big
Sure.
with Clockwise. But we would go down. I remember one summer, we probably played like 6 or 8 times down at Perry Square this one summer.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know
It
if
was
that
all
a
free
common
outreach.
thing.
That's where I met. Okay, now I'm gonna forget his name, but I met Henrik Ostergaard
Oh yeah. Right.
down
yeah.
there at Perry Square. He was 15 years old, and
I
yeah.
saw that you told the story about him on
Oh my
Facebook.
gosh, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was amazing.
Go ahead, tell that. Yeah.
Okay, but so we would show up like 3 hours before the gig. That was like really normal.
Oh my God.
And we
You
would
played
set
with
up.
Scott Campbell in Clockwise, and I swear to God, Scott's still that way. He'll show up like 2 hours before an acoustic gig.
Yeah, so like we would show up, and we had a sound, and like so we had to set up, we had to do sound checks, we did rehearsal and stuff, and so like before the gig started, I just went out into the, out onto the green there,
Sure.
and I started talking to this 15-year-old kid. He was a skinny little kid. If you remember Henrik, if you knew him,
Yeah.
he ended up being like a really tall dude, But we're talking, and he seemed like a little lost soul. And I said, "Listen, man." By that time, I'm pretty sure Scott was in the group, Scott Campbell.
Right.
I said, "Listen, we're playing up at like Asbury Methodist Church for a youth group this next weekend. You want to come?" He goes, "Sure." And I said, "Okay, listen, I'll pick you up." And he came early with us. I'm assuming, because if I picked him up, it had to be early. But so he came to that, and I don't remember any other contact with Henrik after that until fast forward like to the 1980s.
Yeah.
I walked into the Carriage House studio in Stamford, which is the town I live in. And here's this guy with like really long hair, you know, and he looked kind of scary actually a little bit. And he goes, Angelo Natalie from Clockwise? I said, how do you know that? He goes, man, it's me, Henrik. Henrik Ostergaard. This man, when I was a kid, you told, I go,
great.
oh my, like I had totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm going to start crying, man. So I can't.
That's where he was recording his first album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Dirty Looks.
Right.
And so Henrik and I became, like the last couple of years before he passed, we became phone buddies.
Oh, wow.
We would get on the phone and talk, and he just wanted so much, to have peace, and
Yeah.
it was, and he wanted me to participate on his project. So I don't know if you did this. So he said, "Okay, Angela, I want you to play piano on one of my tunes." I said, "Okay." So Henrik wasn't smoking pot or anything, okay? But so I showed up, and the guys in the band, and they're all living in Erie, right? And here I were in Stamford, Connecticut, and he wrote the song I think it's called "Only Friend." You could hear it on Apple Music, etc.
Yeah.
And it was like, kind of like this really mournful rock ballad. It's a prayer. You're Jesus, like you're my only friend.
Wow.
And I'm playing the piano. Now, Dan, I'm a little bit caffeinated. You probably would be surprised to tell you that. But I'm a little caffeinated. So, like, I know I have to relax or I'm going to play ahead of the beat. And then here I am playing with these guys who were smoking pot. And they're really relaxed.
Sedated.
They're playing behind the beat, and I'm playing. And so, like, Henrik is like, "Hey, Ange, you just gotta kind of relax,
Lay
just
off, man.
lay back into." So anyway, so it's still, that little piano lick that
It's on there.
Yeah, it's on there. You could
that's
hear
cool.
it. And I was so very sad to see Henrik pass. And
Well, when you said, like, how do people know who Clockwise is? You guys did come out with one album, An Anthem for His Majesty. Of course, the best part on that is that tiny little part that Pete plays on, right?
Yeah, it's the highlight of the album.
Yeah.
Did I get a credit, Aaron?
you did. What's the name of it?
I think I did.
Skater's Waltz.
Yeah.
Bop, 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 bop.
But I mean, that was a big deal at the time. I mean,
It really was.
We did that. We organized that whole project, Dan.
and
Pete kind of executive produced that in the sense of putting it all together, and with
We went out to LA to find a producer.
Yeah, getting Al Perkins to produce it.
Yeah.
And did Keith and John record a little bit of that?
Keith and John did these work demos for us down at Luther Memorial, which is pretty amazing. They, we weren't members of that church. We just went to the church office and said, "Hey, we're a Christian rock band. We need a place to practice. Do you guys have any space that we could use?" We didn't say for free, but that's what we meant, And they go, "Sure, we have a room downstairs that we don't use." They gave us a key. We could come and go at any time of the day or night and practice down there. And we were there for a long time.
Wow.
We practiced like at least 3 days a week, like 3 afternoons a week down at, and so this tour, as we got closer to recording the Anthem album, Keith and John brought all their gear over to that room and recorded these. And I have a bunch of the stuff that they recorded. I mean, Keith was so incredibly generous to us. I mean, there was no money changing hands, and there was a lot of time and a lot of work that he put in. He was really tight, but he was a longtime friend of Tom Stone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And of course, he knew Bob too, though Bob was a little younger than those guys. Bob's catching up to us
Keith wasn't he when you actually recorded the album in Cleveland. Wasn't he
Oh, yeah.
there the entire time?
Yeah, he assisted. Yeah, he assisted
Okay.
the main engineer, and which
And
was cool.
and Al Perkins was one of Keith's idols.
Yeah.
And when he
Hmm.
learned that Al was producing the album, it was, you know, true providence.
Yeah.
And I know that was really significant for him.
I do this all the time on this podcast. I get talking with guys and, we start throwing names out like Keith and John as though everybody listening
right.
know who it is.
Right.
It's like an inside baseball thing. So Keith Fischecko, listen to that episode that I did that's a tribute to Keith.
Yeah, that was excellent.
great musician, as well as obviously recording engineer. And John Mazza was his partner.
Yeah.
And I did an episode with John also where they talk a little bit about all these things. So
Yeah.
I apologize for throwing those names
No,
out.
me too. And listen, I just want to say that I listened to both of those episodes, but I didn't hear about the whole thing about calling in a tribute to Keith, or I would have definitely done it, because
Give us a story.
Keith he factored in big time, not only with Clockwise, but when I started doing jingles in Erie, I did them at his house studio on whatever was it, West
29th Street.
29th, was it? Yeah.
Right. 29th.
I mean, they had the whole first floor wired up as a studio,
Right.
And it was
Like
very,
Walt.
Durf was
very
living upstairs.
reasonable and very talented. I mean, and eventually I had him play on some stuff, like and engineer,
And that was one of the things I was going to ask you, because we haven't talked about jobs, because you aren't making any money in Clockwise, as you pointed
Right.
out. And I mentioned Niagara Constructors or
Yep.
whatever. What was that? Why were you both involved with that before?
I'll let you.
It had a
talk to
loose
him.
tie. It was loosely affiliated with the church. The guy who actually started what was originally known as Street Church owned the company, and he would kind of recruit members of the church to work in the company.
And it was a builder.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was they were
mechanical construction, like out of
industrial,
GE and-
industrial
Okay.
construction.
Believe me, I actually used a 90-pound jackhammer.
Pete.
I hardly weighed anything more.
Listen, dude.
I might have been 130, but if you've ever tried to operate a 90-pound jackhammer, you would be in his.
I'll tell you what was
thinking
kind of cool
me
about it
using
with Niagara is that they let me work like very specific weird hours so that I could rehearse with the band with
Oh, that's what I
Clockwise.
wondered. Yeah.
So I started as an unskilled laborer. And so, Dan, I was not very good at being unskilled. So they said, we're going to take you off your unskilled position because you're not very good at it, and we're going to make you the truck driver.
Ah, okay.
And so I became the truck driver at Niagara. But it was on that job that I
Can you imagine Dino Danelli being a truck driver, Ange?
well,
You
maybe
gotta
not.
start somewhere, man.
That's right.
How the mighty have fallen.
So that's how we made a living. Is
Yeah.
my wife was what do they call it? Not a nurse, but a
Aid.
nurse's aide. Yes, she was a nurse's aide.
Yeah.
And I was I worked for Niagara Constructors, and eventually I started working for the church as the part-time again as the music director at Street Church. And of course, and all the guys played, like the guys from Clockwise participated, and other guys too that were that went to church there,
That really started a whole nother era for both of our lives, because believe it or not, I actually became a drummer for pretty much a good part of 2 decades in 3 different church
like
bands.
you're talking about more recently, like in the 21st
I'm just
century,
saying,
right?
that kind of transition from street church into,
Right.
Ange has been a full-time musician basically his entire life.
I didn't know you played drums though.
Yeah. Well, Ange had his kit, so I would enjoy messing around. And then when I was in college, I bought my own kit
Yeah.
and had it out in my my little home on the lake in Edinburgh. It was cool. It was a Gretsch kit. I wish I'd still had it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I sold to get the valve trombone. I sold my
Oh
drum kit.
man, son of a gun! You should have kept it, Pete.
You don't have no kits anymore?
I do. I have my wife bought me a 70s vintage Ludwig set that's in my basement.
Cool.
Yeah, but really, I drummed for pretty much a good part of 2 decades.
At church, right?
3 different
At
churches.
different churches.
Yeah.
Well, let me
cool.
jump ahead just for a moment then. So when Ruby Port reforms in the 90s and does that, and you do not come back for that, right?
I did.
Yeah.
The very first thing that we did at Rainbow Gardens,
40
I came back. That's
Okay.
still on. That was in the 20th century though, right? 21st century though, right? It wasn't the 90s. It was.
No, Ange. 40
What?
years, 2011.
Okay, 2011. So yeah, that was. I only played drums a little bit. Steve McConnell played mostly. Steve's a madman. He's like, Animal from.
Sure. The Snowman.
He's like Animal from the Muppets, because the guy can play.
So
but
Joe Salarino, he didn't play back then with you guys?
When Steve was in the second version, not version, but the resurrected version of Ruby Port.
Right.
He was with us, he originally drummed with us, and then when he left is when we brought Joey in.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
You're talking about when Ruby Port reformed. After 2011.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Joe would have been too young to play in the original one.
Yeah.
I think.
We that version of Ruby Port went for 7 years,
awesome.
uninterrupted. So I finally had my, my boyhood dream was finally fulfilled in a meaningful way.
I was going to say,
this time he didn't quit.
With you being a drummer now, Pete, I didn't know if you were like, hey man, I can, my brother was a drummer before, I can fill in now.
I actually sat in once an entire gig for Joey.
Cool.
Nobody really, I'm sure they were skeptical, but I played at least 2 full sets and sang, which I don't know.
Unfortunately, he had to be hospitalized for 3 days after that.
No, I prepared for that gig.
All right. So I did want to mention that because obviously that was a big deal. And then obviously just playing again a couple months ago for the Paul Yocklin benefit.
Yeah.
Angelo, you did not come back for that. Is that correct?
I didn't. I was trying to make it work, and I wanted to see my mom.
Yeah.
Who my mom is like. Shout out to Mom if you listen to this. She's 94, sharp as a tack, but frail physically.
Yeah.
And I saw a window to come back and see her, and I couldn't do both because I'm committed to I'm the music director at a church. Every Sunday morning, I only get so many Sundays off. So that wasn't going to work for me to come back. And I feel bad about missing Paul's memorial event.
Was it amazing? Were you there, Chip?
I couldn't make it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our 40th anniversary, which was really a big deal for all of us and for, honestly, for a lot of our fans.
Sure.
We really packed out Rainbow Gardens.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was a benefit for the Kansas Foundation. And that was the time when everybody was all in on that.
Right.
Paula was there.
Oh yeah. The original members were all there for that.
Cool.
This recent show was even more successable, as a tribute to Paul and to generate funds for his foundation. There were, I probably can't say this, but there was a little bit over capacity.
Yeah,
shall we say.
It was packed.
It was totally packed.
Yeah,
it just was so much fun. Ronnie Sedgy put on a great show.
I'm going to have him on.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I so enjoyed. I never left the dance floor when Ron was on stage.
Great.
And then of course, Timmy Tyson with Wave and some of the original members of that.
I've had him on too. Yeah.
So that was that represented our 50th anniversary, a year late.
So, and you mentioned at the beginning you've been in Connecticut since '84, right?
Yeah.
So you leave Erie in '84. So your Erie music days end there.
Actually, we moved to Nashville in '82.
Okay.
So Clockwise disbanded in 1980, and I started doing a thing called Angelo Natalie Network. And so Bob Madia played guitar, Howie Bolton played bass, and oh my gosh, Newber's buddy. Oh my gosh, my friend. You had Newber on recently, right?
I did not. No.
No, you didn't.
No. Mike Newman.
Who's the recording guy that you just had on a couple weeks ago?
Skip Niebauer.
Yeah,
Sorry, and Skip
Yeah.
was with.
At that time, it was
No,
like
no, I'm talking about Skip who came to the show.
Sam
with
Hyman.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
my old buddy Sam. I feel really
Yes.
bad.
Gotcha.
It was,
We
I
can
had a
edit all that out.
Sam, I had a senior moment, man. I have never forgotten you, my friend.
Yeah.
But Sam played drums
Okay.
with us in back in 80 and 81. In 82, we moved to Nashville.
But in 81, you record the We Love Erie song.
Yeah.
Where's that?
Yes.
Where-
Still got copies of that?
I bet you I do out on reel to reel. And I've wanted to recut that, seriously.
Yeah.
Every year as the summer approaches, I go, I should recut We Love Erie. And
Keith recorded that for you at 20.
he did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
he did. And that was through the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Marcian Bouchard had an advertising agency in Erie, and he was, he was a kind of a patron, and he gave me a handful of jingle jobs while I was still in Erie,
Got it.
and that allowed me to put a reel together, like a demo reel.
Yeah.
I took it to Nashville, and I got a job with Hummingbird Productions, like the first day I was there,
Cool.
and so I was with them for 5 years. About 2 in Nashville and 3.5 in New York. I was commuting every day from Stanford by train.
Ange was a madman.
Wow. guess
Like
so.
the show, right?
Madison Avenue.
That was
Road.
that was a cool experience. And we lost a big account. We lost Cabbage Patch Kids, and which was like really paid the bills.
Yeah.
And so they asked me if I wanted to move back to Nashville or move to their Chicago office. And I had just had my kids were just getting settled in Connecticut, after a few years being there. I said, man, I can't do that to my kids. So I'm going to go freelance. So I have been freelance since May of 87.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, you mentioned obviously that you're working for the church on Sundays, but you also just finished a recording project.
Yes. Okay. So, I've written a lot of music over the years, and got to kind of workshop the music, if I could put it that way, at church. So this is kind of like church tested contemporary. This is contemporary stuff. And so I was going to go to Nashville this week for like 4 days and to do much of this record. And I was getting really nervous about all the news about traveling and cancellations and, all this kind of stuff. So I decided to just do basic tracks. And that's what I did on Monday is we recorded 8 tracks, eight songs, I should say, with a 5-piece band in 9 hours.
Whoa.
Which is pretty productive. And, it was drums, bass, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, and a keyboard player who played piano, and Hammond B3. And he was a monster. I mean, every one of the guys in this band are like superb players. And a few of them I had worked with when I lived in Nashville. So they're older dudes, but really seasoned, really good players, and still very, very called on,
Yeah.
they're on call, top session guys.
So you're still playing. You just said those guys are older dudes. How old are you, each of you?
I'm about to turn 71 next month.
So Pete,
I'm
you're-
70.
I know I don't look it, and
You're 95. Is that right?
my mom's 94.
That's right.
No, I'm 73, and
You're still both playing music.
yeah, man,
That's
it's
awesome.
Well, Dickie always said, Paul until he passed away, he was singing into his 80s.
Yeah.
All the guys who we emulate, they're still going at
Yeah.
80 plus. So to be playing in our 70s, what a blessing, number one. I mean, it's so much fun doing that gig again. Report's been on a hiatus for about 4 years. People really want us to play again, and we may.
Yeah.
But just to be able to do that gig, to pick up the horn after, an extended time of it being retired of a sort, and to play again with those guys and to play the music that we love, especially Ruby Port goes back to our, late teens, early adulthood.
Right.
And, those songs still live on, and they still press the buttons of the people who, comprise our fan base. So that's why we play. Dickie says it all the time at the end of a gig, if it wasn't for you, we couldn't do what we do. And there's so much truth in that.
Yeah. Yeah. When I started this podcast, I knew of some of you guys, Scott Campbell, who I mentioned before, I had played in a band with back in the 90s, and just sitting down and talking with Scott, and we'd worked together, I got to learn names like the Natalies and who Paula was and things like that, And then when I started this podcast, being a musician myself, you do run in those, ups and downs and everything, but meeting a lot of folks like you guys who are still doing it, still playing, it's inspirational. It really is. So I thank you both. Man. I thank you both for being on today. This was fantastic. I hope we covered everything. I didn't know if we needed to delve into Mrs. Ciotti or Mrs. Ciotti anymore.
Man.
Well, listen,
that's a whole other show.
That's a whole other show.
I just want to shout out to Laura, and I just want to big shout out to Kathy Natalie, my lovely bride, who I love very much. And
that's right. That's right. We'll cut all that out.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for, inviting us on this. This is really a compliment. Well, and Dan definitely is one of.
Speaking of Kathy,
dinner.
My God.
We got to wrap this up.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thank you so much. I just want you to know I'm a fan of the show too. I've listened to a lot of the episodes, both people I know and people I don't know, and I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
You have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good one, man.
All
Peace.
Right. Hey, in case you didn't know, I always post photos of the people I interview on their episode page at eriemusichistory.com. And if you like the podcast, please hit like on Facebook, or click subscribe on your podcast app, or go to patreon.com and pledge a few bucks. Super big thanks to our sponsor, the JPT Foundation. They have that bingo hall that's available for rent, and it's also where we host our monthly music night, which is the first Tuesday of each month, that features local band The Fabulous Leftovers, as well as an open mic. All proceeds go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. I also want to remind you to check out my buddy Jack Stevenson's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast for information on who's playing where today and when. That's the Two-Man Happy Hour podcast. So until next time, I'm Chip Shell. Thanks for listening to the Erie Music History Podcast.